He's one of the most iconic villains in movie history, but what do you really know about him? Even huge fans of Star Wars might be surprised at these parts of Darth Vader's story.
What goes into making a great movie villain? A compelling character arc and menacingly cool appearance are obvious starts. Take, for instance, one of sci-fi's reigning baddies for over 4 decades, Darth Vader. But when George Lucas first started filming the character in Star Wars A New Hope, many of the familiar plot points we now associate with Vader were still up in the air, including his status as father to both Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia. That wouldn't be conceived until Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back.
No, I am your father.
But that wasn't the only piece missing from the Star Wars saga or its villain, whom Lucas affectionately and appropriately once called a walking iron lung. Another was Vader's voice, which of course remains as memorable a feature as his terrifying silhouette.
The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force.
While it was James Earl Jones who gave him his intimidating aura via his vocal talents, without actor David Prowse, there'd be nothing to voice. After all, it's Prowse under the suit, and it's his mannerisms as Vader that Jones would try to shape his voice around. Although the two actors whose combined talents helped create one of the 20th century's most iconic villains remained amicable, a growing rift between Lucas and Prowse began to manifest that eventually led the actor to be banned from all Star Wars events. But before that happened, there was a brief moment during the filming of Star Wars A New Hope when Prowse could be heard speaking his lines as he acted them out. Whatever you think it sounds like, it's far more distressingly strange. Thanks to extensive behind-the-scenes footage, curious fans can take a listen at the original version of Vader's voice whenever they want. But be forewarned, as Force Material once carefully noted, with a strong Devonshire accent that earned him the nickname Darth Farmer from the crew, the reality is that Dave Prowse was never going to be called upon to provide the voice of Darth Vader.
Start tearing this ship apart piece by piece until you find those tapes. Find the passengers of this vessel. I want them alive!
The accent is exceptionally jarring, though it's hard to pinpoint why it works for Grand Moff Tarkin and not the Sith Lord. It probably had a lot to do with the amount of muffling caused by the costume and helmet. But David Prowse, a former bodybuilder, brought just as much awe in the full getup as James Earl Jones' voice did. The only problem was that George Lucas apparently refrained from telling the actor he wouldn't be using his voice. In an interview with Yahoo Movies in 2012, the actor described the whole situation as feeling underhand. It's a shame because however comical the comparison between Prowse's and Jones's renditions, it goes without saying Vader was brought to life by both men's different talents. For his part, James Earl Jones always remained respectful of David Prowse's position and often defers to him as the true Vader. But even with his hand-picked choice, George Lucas was very much still in the process of figuring out what worked and didn't work, well into filming the second movie. In an interview with the American Film Institute, Jones even went into some detail about the director giving him notes on how to maintain the ominous mystique they'd built around Vader in the previous film. Naturally, I wanted to make Darth Vader more interesting, more subtle, more psychologically oriented. He said, no, what we're finding out is you've got to keep his voice on a very narrow band of inflection, because he ain't human, really. Although Jones was the right human voice to embody Vader, it's important to remember the character's voice is technically no longer created by necessarily human functions. As much as his booming timbre affords itself to the character, there's also this drone or hum to it that makes it feel robotically monitored.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last.
This perhaps explains why Prowse's accent stands out so much when juxtaposed to decades of hearing Jones's version. But even his voice recordings as Vader revealed just how collaborative the effort to create Vader was. As reported by Open Culture, sound designer Ben Burt worked a little effects magic in syncing scuba gear recordings to Jones's breaths to create the noises made by the Sith's breathing apparatuses. Then there's the fact that during the final film in the trilogy, Star Wars Return of the Jedi, the first film Jones allowed himself to receive credit for, Vader's helmet is removed to reveal actor Sebastian Shaw as the redeemed Anakin Skywalker.
The central villain of George Lucas's 1977 sci-fi flick Star Wars is a stern, steel-eyed military general named Grand Moff Tarkin. He is in command of a moon-sized structure called the Death Star, which can destroy entire planets with a single powerful laser blast. Like all the employees who work for the evil empire, Tarkin is miserably unhappy. One might note that no Empire employees in any of the Star Wars films smile, laugh, or appear to enjoy their jobs. Joy is not in Tarkin's vocabulary. Tarkin is a fine character, and Peter Cushing is an excellent actor. But as a character, he was massively upstaged by his mysterious lieutenant, an evil mask-wearing semi-robotic warlock named Darth Vader. Because Darth Vader left such an impact on audiences, the many Star Wars sequels and prequels were reworked to highlight him. In his 1993 autobiography, James Earl Jones' Voices and Silences, Jones tells a story that he has likely told many times over about how he got the role and his approach to his performance. In his autobiography, Jones wrote that it was fun playing Darth Vader.
So he called around. I think he thought of Orson Welles first, and then realized that he might be too recognizable.
When pressed further, Jones recalled that playing Darth Vader was little more than a paycheck for him. He just needed a quick buck, and this George Lucas fella had a little extra scratch to distribute. It was a casual quick job, and even Lucas seemed to think so, Jones said. After he put the film together, George Lucas decided that he wanted a voice in the bass register. I don't think that David Prowse is a bass. David also has a slight Scottish accent, so George began to look for someone to do a voiceover. I understand that George did contact several actors to read for the voice of Darth Vader before he contacted me. I was out of work and he said, "Do you want a day's work?" And I said, "Sure." Jones returned time and time again to play Darth Vader, a role he voiced in 6 Star Wars movies, along with video games, talking Hallmark ornaments, and other ancillary merch. He eventually came to love playing the character, saying of the movies, they were all a joy. And it seems a really easy way to make a lot of money.
I am your father.
But when it came to creating a character, Jones gave all the credit to Prowse. For one, Prowse had to wear the mask and suit and provide all of the character's body language, something Jones would not have wanted to do. Prowse made the character physically intimidating, even while the actor's face was obscured. Jones felt he was merely there to sweeten another actor's performance, the same way a sound mixer might have been used to distort an actor's voice. Jones said, "David Prowse worked very hard to create the character Darth Vader. He is Vader. I just consider myself to be special effects. That's how I approached it. I just sat there and had all the fun of playing my voice like an instrument."
Intense criticism, health concerns, and a devastating family tragedy. Jake Lloyd's time in the Star Wars universe was cut short for a shocking reason. Here's what happened to the actor who played young Anakin in The Phantom Menace. Following the release of Return of the Jedi in 1983, Star Wars entered something of a low-profile period. For over a decade, the trilogy was only to be found on home video, which only allowed the myth of Star Wars to grow. Unsurprisingly, the 1999 release of Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace was an enormous blockbuster event, with fans waiting outside theaters for weeks in anticipation. The Phantom Menace was initially adored by fans, and many committed to seeing it multiple times. However, a delayed consensus began to form that The Phantom Menace actually sucked. For one, much of the plot was strangely bureaucratic for a Star Wars film. Focusing on trade disputes and civics, the character of Jar Jar Binks, created through then-revolutionary CGI, was widely derided as shrill and useless. However, no element of The Phantom Menace was more derided than the depiction of a young Anakin Skywalker, the child who would grow up to be Darth Vader. Anakin was played by 9-year-old actor Jake Lloyd, previously known for his role in the Arnold Schwarzenegger Christmas film Jingle All the Way. Lloyd was selected to play Anakin for his enthusiasm and energy, a stark contrast from the cloaked villain of the 1977 film. Lloyd's youthfulness and often silly lines of dialogue weren't a hit with viewers, leading to a harsh and unwarranted online bullying campaign against the young actor.
No, they really didn't care. I'm a 10-year-old kid, you know?
Starring in a film as big and as polarizing as The Phantom Menace made Lloyd a target. He reprised his role in a handful of tie-in Star Wars video games, but he never escaped the cruelty of the film's huge audience. Because of the teasing he received at school, Lloyd retired from acting in 2001, at the age of 12. Sadly, the years weren't kind to The Phantom Menace, and many began to consider it as one of the worst blockbusters ever made. Lloyd has said in interviews that he ended up burning his Star Wars merchandise, revealing that he can't get himself to ever watch the movie again. Although Lloyd would go on to study film at Columbia College in Chicago, he dropped out after a semester.
I get a lot of people asking me a lot of random stuff.
In 2015, Lloyd's mother called the police following a violent outburst by her son, and revealed that the former actor was living with paranoid schizophrenia. Lloyd had reportedly been off his meds during the incident in question, but his mother decided not to press charges. Later that year, Lloyd had found himself in trouble again after running a red light in South Carolina. A police chase ensued, and Lloyd crashed his car into a tree. He was subsequently arrested and held in a South Carolina jail for 10 months before being transferred to a psychiatric facility. In 2018, the family experienced more tragedy when Lloyd's younger sister unexpectedly died in her sleep at the age of 26. Following his sister's death, Lloyd moved closer to home. In 2020, Jake's mother Lisa released a statement published in Geek News Now saying, "Jake has been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but unfortunately, he also has a symptom called anosognosia, which causes a lack of insight into his illness. This only adds to the struggle he faces, which has been very difficult after the tragic loss of his younger sister Madison." In her statement to Geek News Now, Lloyd's mother also explained, "He is still a kind and caring person, and we hope to have him back to his fun and entertaining self as soon as possible. Jake will continue to make progress with the love and support you continue to show." Having to deal with the death of his sister, along with his own medical diagnoses, must have been a lot of pressure on Lloyd, who'd already struggled with bullying from the Star Wars fandom. Lloyd would not be the only actor bullied by Star Wars fans either. Ahmed Best, the actor who played Jar Jar Binks, revealed that he considered suicide after the bad reaction audiences had to his character. More recently, Kelly Marie Tran faced online harassment and racism due to her portrayal of Rose Tico in 2017's Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Lloyd was only a child when backlash against The Phantom Menace started, and it's impossible to know exactly how the negativity affected him. It seems pretty clear, though, that the world owes him an apology.
While some fans can't be trusted to keep plots of major books, movies, and television shows a secret, we know that the actors can, thanks to their professionalism and, well, the fear of breaching their NDAs.
Zip.
Many years ago, however, a spoiler almost destroyed a major future plot twist that creator George Lucas's original Star Wars trilogy intended to set up: Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader's father-son reveal.
No, I am your father.
David Prowse, the late actor behind Darth Vader's helmet in the films, was the culprit. Thankfully, the lack of the World Wide Web back in the day stopped the spoiler from ruining Star Wars forever. Still, when George Lucas got wind of it, it was the beginning of a feud with David Prowse, one that would eventually lead to the filmmaker banning the actor from all future Star Wars events. David Prowse portrayed the imposing evil figure in the original trilogy of films. He also provided dialogue on set for Darth Vader before Star Wars creator George Lucas hired James Earl Jones to dub over him.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last.
When Vader's true face was revealed in Return of the Jedi, actor Sebastian Shaw was seen as the man behind the mask, and not Prowse, the actor known for physically portraying the antagonist inside the suit. Ever wondered why that was? Prowse's long-standing feud with George Lucas had something to do with it. In late 1978, 2 years before Empire Strikes Back hit theaters, David Prowse made a public appearance where he revealed to the press that Darth Vader was Luke's father. The moment was reported by the San Francisco Examiner. The world didn't have access to the internet then, so George Lucas and Star Wars enthusiasts had no way of knowing that David Prowse was running around and spilling the beans on the most valuable piece of information the franchise could ever have. David Prowse said that there would be a Luke versus Vader do-or-die lightsaber duel. During the ensuing battle, Luke would learn that Vader was his father, and in the words of Prowse, father can't kill son, son can't kill father, so they live again to star in Star Wars 4. The actor later called the big reveal a lucky guess, since the script for The Empire Strikes Back hadn't been written yet. Regardless of Prowse's defense, George Lucas was furious about the reveal. The filmmaker cast Sebastian Shaw for the role of the unmasked Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi, leaving Prowse only in the suit while Vader's helmet was on, although he was allegedly promised the unmasked part. In 2010, Prowse appeared in The People vs. George Lucas, a supposedly anti-Lucas documentary.
I imagine George in a crystal castle drinking margaritas, lying on a bed made of people.
The actor's relationship with George Lucas severed the same year, and he was banned from attending all Star Wars events. Prowse said in a statement on his website, "After inquiring, the only thing I have been told is that I have burned too many bridges between Lucasfilm and myself. No other reason was given." According to Den of Geek, the actor also narrated an incident from the early 80s when a journalist called him to discuss his weightlifting career. The conversation quickly sidetracked when Prowse was asked about his character being killed off in the third Star Wars movie. Prowse said, "He turned up at my gymnasium that evening, and halfway through he says, 'You know you're being killed off in this movie, don't you? And another guy's playing the dying Darth Vader?' I said, 'They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't go and unmask somebody else after I've played the part for 6 years. He asked if I had a call sheet, and he looked at it, and it said, Dave Prowse, Darth Vader, Studio 1, and underneath it, Sebastian Shaw, Anakin Skywalker, Studio 10. Prowse then went on to recall how the Daily Mail ran a story the day after the interview interview with a headline that read, "Darth Vader to be killed off in the next movie," in an interview with David Prowse. It was the last straw in his relationship with Lucasfilm and spoiled his association with the franchise forever, the actor recalled, "And that ruined my association with Star Wars. I was ostracized while on the movie. The producer and director wouldn't work with me, and Lucas wouldn't speak to me. I had 6 weeks of purgatory." In his autobiography, Straight from the Force's Mouth, Prowse once again clarified that the reporter had broken the news of Darth Vader's death to him, not the other way around. Despite their personal quibbles, George Lucas paid tribute to the actor after he passed away in 2020 at the age of 85. The filmmaker said that David Prowse made Darth Vader, quote, "leap off the page." Lucas added, "David was up for anything and contributed to the success of what would become a memorable, tragic figure. May he rest in peace."
While the Star Wars prequel trilogy is often criticized, it seems George Lucas and his team did viewers a favor by leaving one gruesome scene out of Revenge of the Sith. There are a lot of reasons why some audiences think the Star Wars prequels don't work, but perhaps the biggest is that Anakin's turn to the dark side isn't all that convincing. There's no hint of Vader at all in the young boy we see in The Phantom Menace, and the obsessive young man he turns into in Attack of the Clones doesn't resemble the legendary villain much either. However, it seems that Lucas did try to play up the tragic elements of Anakin's fall from grace by making him more cunning and likable in Revenge of the Sith. What should have been a gradual descent into villainy over the course of 3 movies is instead all packed into a single film, which means Anakin's turn feels insanely rushed. He goes from a genuinely good guy worried about the safety of his pregnant wife to somebody who commits premeditated mass murder in remarkably little time. Perhaps the most unforgettable sequence of Anakin's transition to the dark side is his often memed murder of younglings. Despite how contrived the scene can feel, the look of fear that arises in the class of young Jedi faces does pull at the heartstrings. While the final result of Anakin's massacre is largely implied, rather than shown on screen, the original plan for the movie had something much more gruesome on the docket.
He said, "You've turned to the dark side? That you killed younglings?"
The stunt coordinator for the film, Nick Gillard, spoke to Tatooine Times in 2020 about how the movie was originally a bit more explicit when it comes to all the child murder stuff. Gillard explained, "We went into Hayden's garage the night before we were going to shoot the scene and made it so violent. It was horribly violent. You can't see it, but Anakin stabs a little girl through her throat. It's the sort of thing that makes Anakin's appearance as a Force ghost at the end of Return of the Jedi feel a little less warm and fuzzy. While Vader does save his son's life and redeem himself by betraying Emperor Palpatine, it still feels like he has a lot more to atone for before his spirit can happily hang out with the others. In some way, we should be thankful that, in a rare moment of creative restraint, Lucas decided to cut the scene down. As Gillard explained, they initially edited the footage to appear as a hologram, but even that put Lucas off enough to cut it from the film.
If into the security recordings you go, only pain will you find.
In terms of the actual events that transpire, Revenge of the Sith may very well be the darkest entry in the entire Star Wars franchise. As to whether the film successfully achieves that dark tone, that's a bit more debatable. It's easy to make fun of how quickly Anakin spirals into evil, but the movie does deserve some credit for understanding, in this scene at least, that the implication is often scarier than the real thing. The decision to spare us the sight of murdered younglings is reminiscent of the scene in A New Hope, where Vader forces Leia to watch the destruction of her home planet, Alderaan. It's another moment that, if you dwell on it longer than the movies chose to, would seriously undercut Vader's eventual redemption. Vader sort of makes things right with Luke, sure, but how could he possibly make things right with his daughter? It's easy to imagine a version of A New Hope where the film cuts to a street-level view of Alderaan, showing us all the men, women, and children that live there before their untimely deaths. Instead, we only see the destruction from space, so far away that the human toll isn't visible. The audience is left to imagine what the people of Alderaan were like, and to imagine the sheer extent of Leia's grief. It's a restrained storytelling choice that establishes Vader as a dangerous villain in the moment, but avoids being so disturbing that it's still lingering in our minds during Luke and Vader's final heart-to-heart. Anakin commits plenty of war crimes once he turns to the dark side, but Lucas always knew to keep the worst of them implied.